Thank you for being here. I wish to apologize to many people who contacted me last week about not having a press engagement. I'm trying to sustain this weekly press engagement, which I started a few months back after having been absent from the media for a while. And I've done so largely because we need to kill a lot of the rumors that this country has grown accustomed to being peddled by the opposition and their affiliates. And so last week I thought that the country needed to listen to the president. My press conference would have come the day after he had spoken extensively about the development plans in the country and gave an account of several aspects of his policy making, including foreign policy, domestic policy, sector-specific strategies, etc. I thought that the country would have welcomed that treat where the head of state would feel it necessary to account to the country and be so detailed in his presentation, and the country needed time to assimilate all he said. Instead, I saw it being sidetracked by a number of people who would have never had no interest whatsoever in reporting anything positive about what the president said. I think many of them were hoping to have some scandal emerge from his press conference, which didn't happen. And so I would urge the country once again to listen to what the president said at his press conference so that you're aware of what we are doing globally in the climate area, in food security, and in many other areas to transform Guyana. Now, I did not get to respond to a press conference held by the AFC, and many people question the wisdom of responding to an organization that is practically defunct now and has no political future. Nevertheless, I thought it's important that we sometimes respond to some of the things they say just so that the people are not misled and though they don't get repeated. So I have personally in the last week witnessed how the rumor mill started by APNU and some of the NGOs can affect people's perception of many programs. So first, I was in Lane Avenue. I spoke, actually Rumvelt, East Rumvelt, and I met a group of people from Lane Avenue. They came to Freedom House. This was in the pre-election period. And I said to them, I'm busy, I can't visit the community. So after the elections, we will work with you on a housing improvement program. Many of them had complained about the conditions in which they live. Many live in range houses, etc. I said we will do something for Lane Avenue, Yarrow Dam, and some of the other sideline dam. So I visited those communities. We set up a committee to work on a home improvement program. Now, APNU, having done nothing for these communities, not even fixing the road in Lane Avenue, and they claim it's their stronghold, they then realize that a number of people may come to the meetings to for the home improvement program. So they started spreading a rumor that became very potent, that somehow there is an Inter-American Development Bank grant given to the government of Guyana, and that each home must collect $500,000 in Lane Avenue from this grant. So that is how they work. They can't compete, they did nothing for the community. They can't, when the PPP tries to do something in the community, they then come up with this to downplay it and to take away its potency as a political tool, basically, or it's a community development tool. They distort it. So I want to say, a number of people from Lane Avenue call me, and I want to say to them to tell the people who are spreading the rumors in Lane Avenue, some of their operatives, that those who want to believe their APNU rumor don't need to come to the committee meeting. They can go to Congress Place, and I'll give them the address of the Inter-American Development Bank, and they can go there and collect their $500,000 for home improvement. So go ask Norton to give you the money, and he will take you to the Inter-American Development Bank. There's absolutely no such program. Absolutely no such program. And so yesterday I came from Maruca, and again having some NGOs trying to block the LCDS funding from these communities, and all of the villages were there in the Maruca sub-district, and the residents spoke about how the LCDS funds have the capability of transforming their lives, they're getting assistance, etc. But then one person got up and said to me, the same NGOs that are trying to block the funding from coming to the communities are now spreading the rumor on the ground. Oh, it's not government doing this. It is NGO money, NGO resources. So we've seen Janet Bulkan and the others saying it's illegal. The carbon trading scheme and the carbon sale was illegal. Actually, to quote her, an illegal Government of Guyana act. 2, the APA trying to block the resources by stopping this program, the certification of the forest. And now, many of them are telling the communities that this is NGO money that they're receiving. Well, it's not NGO money. It came as a result of hard work that the government of Guyana did. When we returned to office, we got our forest immediately. We set about working on the low carbon, an expanded low carbon development strategy. By December of 2020, we started looking for a program to certify our forests, because without international certification, we wouldn't have been able to give the credibility to the forest credits that we were going to put on the market. We found an organization. We worked 2 years to have our forest certified. We have the only jurisdictional scale certification in the world, and only because of that we were able to sell 30% of that credit for $700 million. And the Amerindian communities over the next decade will get $112 million of this one of the $700 million or so, thereabouts, 15% of that. So, and that's just 30% of the credit. It was because of this government's effort. It's not NGO money. The money belongs to Guyana, and it belongs to our people. But I find a lot of this schizophrenia. People don't have credibility to go to the communities, so they spread rumors because they fight to downplay and erode all the positive initiatives that the government is working on in their communities, whether it's Lane Avenue or in Port Morant or in this case, in the indigenous communities. And so we have seen this transforming, this level of deceitfulness, even at major events held by political parties. So the AFC in question and the APNU. Now, I don't know if it's ignorance or it's just, as I said before, deceit. But last week we had the AFC talking about the economy. And so their big beef was that we're borrowing too much. They've come back to the old team. When you listen to them, they don't have much to say. But we are borrowing too much, and therefore we're imperiling the future of our children and our country. Because if we borrow too much, a future generation has to service that debt, and we're affecting our development potential. And secondly, we may not have the capacity to repay all of our current borrowing in the future. So we have been on record of addressing this issue many, many times before. This was the state of the country when we took office. If you look at Carl Greenidge's affidavit in the Green Mining Construction, pointed out there that the stock of debt was over 900% of GDP. So that meant our debt was 9 times the size of our economy. And we were using over 100% of revenue to service debt. So that meant every cent we collected in revenue was going to service debt, mainly external debt. That was the starting point. Effectively, our country was bankrupt. If you have a debt that is 9 times your asset as a country, 9 times your asset, you own a home and your debt is 9 times the value of your home. And 2, that you have to use every month more than 100% of your salary to pay the debt, you are effectively bankrupt. And that is what happened in Guyana in the 90s under APNU's stewardship. It got to a stage where we were declared uncreditworthy. Nobody wanted to lend us anymore. The IMF declared us uncreditworthy. And that is when, as a last resort, the government went into an IMF program in the 90s. Fast forward to today. Even before today, let's go to 2015, pre-oil. Pre-oil, our debt had already come down to 45% of GDP, from 900% of GDP, as Carl Greenidge declared, to about 45% of gross domestic product. So our debt now was less than half of the size of our economy. And that happened because of a combination of things. We paid back a substantial amount of debt. We got a lot of debts written off through an aggressive program that I personally led in many ways. billions of dollars of debt written off. And thirdly, our economy had grown bigger, significantly larger. So that was pre-oil. Today, our debt, based on the 2022 figure, is now about 23% of gross domestic product, or the economy. Less than about a quarter of our economy. It's one of the lowest figures in the world. The United States debt to GDP ratio is nearly 100%. In Europe, many countries in Europe, it's over 100%. I'm talking about developed countries of the world. And ours, our total debt outstanding, domestic and foreign, is less than 25% of GDP, of which the bulk of it is the domestic debt, less external debt. In 2022, actually, it was just about 10% was external debt, borrowing from abroad. So we have some of the best or lowest debt to GDP ratio in the entire world as of today. I'm sitting here before you now, and we have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the entire world, in spite of all that we have borrowed so far. Secondly, we're spending about $31 billion to service that debt, which is about 7 to 8% of revenue last year. So you recall, I said in 2020, it was in the 90s, it was over 100% of revenue. Last year, it was less than 10% of revenue used to service debt. So effectively, we have some of the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the world, and we have one of the lowest debt to revenue servicing of the debt in the world. Most countries in the Caribbean now are using upwards of 60% of their revenue to service debt. Where we were in the past, we're over 100%, they're climbing up now. And we are now under 10% of revenue to service our debt. So one of the lowest in the world. So for anyone to say, characterize, and the PPP has managed almost from 90s to now, most of this period, except in the period, the blip period when APNU got into office and they skyrocketed domestic borrowing. So you recall Jordan talking about 900 million from the Petroleum Development Fund and all of that nonsense. So this has been one of the success stories of Guyana and the PPP civic management of our economy and our debt. And even now, with the debt policy that we have, unlike APNU, we shun variable rate loans. So there are only two, the last time I spoke to you, I explained this. There are only two variable rate loans, international loans that we have, and they are both to a multilateral institutions, not to private creditors. So that speaks about our management, debt service and debt management. We're very careful about that. Now, the schizophrenia that I'm talking about is, on one hand, the APNU and AFC like to portray that we receive all of this oil money and we're splurging oil money everywhere else, everywhere in the country, including Glenn Lal. At one stage, he was saying, oh, you're not getting enough. Now I've seen him jumping on that bandwagon. The government is spending oil money everywhere in Guyana. And so in his case, he's saying we're not getting enough. but we're spending all of this and it's too much. We're spending too much on people. In their case, the headline says, government only collected $657 million this year, but we borrowed $905 million. We collected oil money in the first half of the year, $657 million, and we borrowed $905 million. Included, when I look at this is now Patterson and the others speaking, included in the 905 is a loan from Qatar for $350 million, which doesn't exist, not in our books. We have no loan from Qatar. The president said when he was in Qatar that there was an indication that there would be a line of credit from Qatar, but we haven't even accessed it. We have not utilized any such. There is no loan from Qatar in our books worth $350 million. So immediately, if they had any sense, they would call the debt unit and find out if the government had contracted any loan of this sort. So first of all, the figures are wrong. But it seems as though every single time we have to explain the framework, and especially to parliamentarians who are so ignorant that you almost have to, on a daily basis, like try to educate a lot of the AFC and APNU parliamentarians who sit there, and I question whether they actually understand what happens in the budget process. And then they get a lot of useless articles coming out, and also a lot of those who drank the Kool-Aid repeating a lot of some of this stuff. So, and when we passed the budget for this year, the budget was about $782 billion. So let's go to US dollars. If you divide this by $210 exchange rate, you get about $3.7 billion. That's the size of our budget passed by the parliament. Now, there are three ways that you finance budget. Actually, two, but I would, in this case, split it into three. One, revenue, non-oil revenue. Two, oil revenue. And three, by borrowing. That's globally. Globally, that is how budgets are framed. Now, at budget time, we said to this country, our total revenue is $578 billion, but the budget is $782 billion. So that presupposes, if anyone had this sense, but it's explicit, anyone knows about budgeting, then the rest has to come from borrowing. It has to come from borrowing. If this is your expenditure for the year and this is your revenue, and this was transparently done in a budget debate. So we got $2.8 billion of the $3.7 billion in revenue. Of the $2.8 billion, $1 billion is oil in revenue. Now, the total revenue is $2.8 billion, of which $1 billion is oil money. But we have a budget of $3.7 billion. So when you add $1 billion from oil, the oil resources, to the $1.8 billion non-oil revenue, you get up to $2.8 billion. When you subtract $2.8 billion from 3.7, you're left with $900 million US dollars gap. So that means you have to fill the gap by borrowing. This is all transparently done in a budget debate. So you haven't borrowed as yet. You now have to go out and contract the loans. That is what we are doing. But they knew this all along in the budget debate. Every time you sign up to a new loan, they make it look like it's a new borrowing, but it's catered for in the budgetary process if you understand it. If you understand it. And that is this sort of ignorance. And the same thing with the NRF withdrawal. So we now say, based on the formula, we will withdraw $1 billion from the NRF to the budget. That comes as revenue, the billion I'm speaking about. Every time we withdraw 200 million, the government withdraws another 200 million from the NRF. It is as though we're going back to the NRF every time. That's catered for in the budget time. It's a framework. So this is what we get from ignorance. AFC, APNU, ignorance. They don't do their job at budget time. Many of them don't even understand what they're debating. And so, how much of our total budget, how much of it is financed by oil resources? It's 27%. Less than 1/3 of our budget is financed by oil revenue. More than 1/3 of it is from revenue from other sources, non-oil sources. Or revenue from non-oil sources will be nearly twice as much as oil revenue. And so this is what I wanted to explain to people. Every single, first of all, a healthy dose of lies. Oh, the government is borrowing more, adding loans that we didn't even take, and then not understanding in the framework. So the AFC talking about us burdening future generations now, when we have dropped the servicing of our debt from over 100% of revenue to under 10% of revenue, and the debt from over 900% of GDP now to less than 25% of GDP. It means our capacity to carry debt has vastly been enhanced, and our capability for servicing the debt has grown now. And then also our future revenue, projected revenue, even from the oil and gas sector, by 2028, a year's revenue will be equivalent to almost our total outstanding debt. So we're careful in our management of debt, and we have to contract debts. But now, why are we contracting the debt? So the gap in the budget. Why are we contracting debt? And what do you invest in if you contract debt that would add to the future capacity of this country, the growth of welfare, people's welfare, the growth of productive capacity, etc. And the debt, take for example, they mentioned the loan from Saudi Arabia. Now a loan at 2% interest, very low interest, what is it going for? So that is what you have to check for. APNU, if you look at the capital budget, they cut their capital budget every single year below the 2014 level when they're in office. So their borrowing was not going to build capital stock. The capital budget builds your schools, roads, highways, sea defenses, etc. They cut that. So clearly they were borrowing to consume. The same one, let me use the 150 million from Saudi Arabia example. 100 million for infrastructure in housing. In housing, so that we can produce 50,000 house lots, because that would only be able, if you look at the cost of infrastructure, and this is subsidized housing that we're basically providing to people. The cost of the infrastructure is very, very high. So the $20 billion this year alone, we have assigned over $50 billion for housing infrastructure to prepare these new schemes, etc. Only $20 billion will come from this loan, of that. But that is what it goes towards, helping people to own a home. The other $50 million will be to finance the bridge in Linden, and that would be $35 million, and plus then for the bridge itself, and then probably another $7-8 million for civil works to build the roads leading out of the area on both sides, the approaches, etc. That's what we borrow for. We're borrowing to the gas to energy project so that we can bring electricity prices down, solve the electricity problem. We can then provide cooking gas for the country at probably half of the price. Solving a problem, and the project pays back for itself over the long run. So although you take the debt now, you pay back for it from the project itself. We're borrowing for 12 hospitals that will make sure that our people now, that they can expand health care to our people right across the country and at a higher quality level. We borrowed for the bridge across the Demerara River because that bridge would change the whole dynamics of these two regions, which are the most populous regions. So it is what you invest in. It is what you invest in. And so APNU can't claim the same thing, or the AFC. So when I got to take an economic lessons from Ramjatan, who hardly knows where he is, or a Patterson talking about the procurement and how, imagine Patterson talking about the procurement system of Guyana. A man who single-handedly violated every law that we've had on procurement, single-handedly, for which he is charged now. Then I need to be out of this job or get my head re-examined if a person like that could even have the gumption of talking about procurement. Routinely, we have had to put back the procurement systems in place that he violated and basically bypassed on numerous occasions, and many for his own benefit. So this is the AFC press conference. That was what they were talking about, economy. And imagine the country having to listen to that sort of thing. So that's what I want people to understand. That clearly you're going to have a lot of things that sound plausible, and for them it's just sound bites. Oh, the PPP borrowing too much, because every time the loan is contracted, it's in the newspapers. But that loan has been catered for in the budgetary process, and it is going to a productive cause. So we'd have to do much more at educating them. So the AFC, after the president's press conference, Kaichor News again had this thing: the management structure for the oil sector remains a mystery. And talking about the framework. And for me, we have given more clarity than any government, well, APNU, has ever given in one day about the framework than APNU had given in 5 years. And we made it clear what this framework is. Now, the framework includes all of the things we have done already: the NRF amendment, the local content law, the new PSA that we've just finalized, the petroleum activities bill, the auction, future auction, the strengthening of the EPA permits. So we made it clear that in the absence, a commission is not necessarily the governance structure. We have given it clearly how we will manage this industry now and the framework we're creating. A petroleum commission, some countries don't have petroleum commissions. We've made a commitment that sometime in the future we will put in place a petroleum commission. But for the countries that don't have petroleum commissions and have oil and gas sector, they still have management frameworks in place, and we have a clear management framework in place that will operate in the absence of the petroleum commission, which in the future we will put in place. That's as clear as daylight. As clear as daylight. And so that is what we will pursue at this time. That's the management framework, strengthening the ministry, addressing the sector. So that too, again, gets converted because of the government's position that the Petroleum Commission shall come in later, not now, that somehow we don't have a structure for managing the sector. That's absolutely untrue. We have a structure for managing the sector, and we have done well in this regard by putting in place the framework and the assessments, licensing, everything else. So I just wanted to kill that little kite that someone started flying again. No doubt might be Glenn Lal and talking about this. Today I have Parliament, so I didn't want to go on for much longer. Again, the rumor mills, I saw this thing about how for almost an entire week, so Afro-Guyanese will be excluded from the new housing schemes, etc. But that started again by some of the APNU operatives and their surrogates abroad, the Burke, the criminal Burke, and the others. So Burke is now selling real estate in Guyana. A group of people contacted me, Afro-Guyanese, that he is trying to sell out their property. We saw that with Christopher Jones one time when he got the land in the back road area that displaced a family, an Afro-Guyanese family that was living there for over 20 years, and the Lands and Survey gave him the land. Well, so too Burke has been selling out some land or trying to sell out land that people own through a corrupt deal. And these are Afro-Guyanese. And the people came to see me. So no doubt he knows this will be exposed. So suddenly he says, oh, government of Guyana will not include Afro-Guyanese in the new housing schemes. We're expanding Georgetown, and they would not be included. A Silica City, nobody would be included. Of course, all nonsense. If you look at the places and the house lots who were given the house lots, you would see clearly that it's disproved. But you had that rumor again started this week. These are criminal types who reside in the U.S., who live off of people. He has extorted a businessman. He was collecting money under that scheme. Here, things are very brown in the U.S. for him, I gather. And so he's looking here to make money by criminality. But he's not here, so we can't go after him. And the people that he's trying to rob here in Guyana, they can't go after him too. So I would urge people not to look at this. I saw this callous portrayal of the opposition again from about the resources that were given to the families from Madia. Let's say from the very beginning that this government led from the top on this issue. The president himself visited Madia several times. You contrast that with Granger behavior. when we had tragedies of that nature. How many times Granger went to the prison or met with the families when 17 persons were burnt up in the prison fire or in other places. He led from the top. Almost every minister that I know was assigned to families. They work with them to take people through a very difficult period, to put in place the logistics to assist the families personally from the beginning. Because that's the nature of our government. Even when a tragedy of that nature strikes, we don't back away and hide. The government went to the forefront, assisting the family to get through the tragedy with all the expenses. A number of people from the family membership approached the government for help. And the president made it clear. It's not basically that they will assist. Pursuant to that, the government decided to assist these families. And that assistance now, which is a request from the family, now suddenly is upturned that, oh, we are trying to, and by people like Amanza Walton and Roysdale Ford, suddenly they're concerned about First Peoples. Of course, they have no interest in First People. They didn't say a word when the APNU government decimated the lives of many people in the communities. But they see a political issue here, like how they showed up at Foothill, etc. And they want to link it to indigenous people as though we are neglecting them, or somehow it's a discriminatory act. The families are getting their assistance. But if the auditors, as the Attorney General pointed out, we have to have a paper trail too, because it's public funds. And that is what they're doing. The Attorney General Office has to protect that aspect, the fiduciary responsibility of the government. We don't know what will come out of the Commission of Inquiry, and we have an open mind on that. But we are going to assist the families now. Many of them need the assistance now. And for these people shedding crocodile tears, Amanza Walton and the others, I call it crocodile tears. They have absolutely no concern for indigenous people. Their policy showed it in the past. The same Roysdale Ford didn't say a word when Amerindians were threatened if they didn't get more lands. They would, if they got more lands, they couldn't benefit from oil money in the parliament by an MP and a minister of that government. Not a word of condemnation of him. Now suddenly and that was against indigenous people, or when they terminated nearly 2,000 of them. Here they want to turn a tragedy against us. But we have worked with those families, and we'll continue to work with them. And the Commission of Inquiry shall proceed. Therefore, I just had to say that the approach was demonstrated the concern. I wonder if the 17 families who lost the lives of the people in the prison, wherever they got assent from the government, they were in the care. They're saying that the care of the prison too. You should check if they got assent at that time from the government. I don't know. These are a lot of the issues. So I think I'm going to end there, because I have to be prepared to go to the Parliament. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Well, I didn't get the first one. Oh, yes. So that is for me. It's a routine thing. we've made it clear that we are borrowing for a purpose, and that purpose is to expand the productive capacity of this country. It's not overburdening the national capability to borrow, and it's being invested in issues that will bring greater comfort to people and also help with our productive sector by generating more jobs. So it's the highways, the East Coast Highway, the bridges, and I mentioned hospitals, other similar venture. It's not to consume. And so we are clear about that. All of our borrowing is to expand productive capacity. So we knew once that had happened, then we'll come up against the debt ceiling, and the debt ceiling is now adjusted to accommodate this borrowing, which is catered for in the budget in any way. APNO. Okay. Yes, actually, I mentioned that somewhere else. So the reason they delayed the rally in the city is that they went to a few businessmen to fund it. It was a poor turnout too, and they drove around the city, but they were shaking down some businessmen. And in fact, we believe some may have been induced and promised benefits. Now, the benefits, you heard what I said before about the stewardship of the APNO there. Now, it's strange that APNO will put, in this case, particularly in this case, someone who had been deputy mayor there for a while, who lost his constituency to a newcomer to politics from our side, Alfonso Fidel. A newcomer, he lost his constituency. APNO brought him back. And I wonder why. But this was the same individual who had some things to say about me at the rally launch. And I spoke about him too. And I spoke about his attempts to sell properties out in the city. And I spoke about the town clerk having to intervene to block these sales. I saw a strange development a couple days ago that suddenly there's a private charge against the town clerk. And I wonder if it's instigated to get her out of there because she was the one who was the humbug to them selling out the properties in the city. It was a strange thing. 2 days ago I saw a private criminal charge being filed against the town clerk. And I'm wondering if it's instigated by APNO. So we have our 11 councillors will look out for any sale of the city properties. That's one. Two, any attempt to give waivers to people. Don't think the mayor must not think the people can come into his office and he will approve a waiver for them on their taxes. That has to go through a transparent process. And we're going to be fighting to ensure that there is either a policy that everyone can benefit for, but there'd be no negotiation, private sidebar kind of negotiation about rates and taxes, which used to be the norm and the source of collecting money. And thirdly, I got another big area for corruption in the cities with the market committee, that they shake down the vendors through the market committee. So we are looking at these three areas carefully, our councillors, and also the accounts of the city, to ensure that they don't get their design in there. But I heard that in fact some of the people who
they approach and didn't give them money are fearful that for the rally, they are fearful they may get into trouble at the city council. But they've been shaking people down. They're known to do this. And Norton, having said publicly he didn't have money to contest the local government elections. Of course, it's a lie, because you don't need to spend a lot of money to contest local government elections. Most of it is done by the committees themselves in every area. But I've asked already, people don't have any confidence in them, because if you could get your treasurer to write you 20 blank checks and not having to account to your general counsel or anyone else about these blank checks, about expenditure that you insert into these blank checks, because he inserted expenditures into the blank checks, then how would people have any confidence in you to give you funds that would be used for a political purpose, maybe siphon off into personal purposes? Yes, Dennis. Close to. Okay.
As General Secretary, how would the issue with the Mohammed's influence, as General Secretary, do you believe that Mr. Dr. Ali stands a good chance of beating the presidential candidate in light of that election?
Whether Ali will be the presidential candidate again? So let me go through this entire issue. So first of all, as the Reuters story said, there's been no official, and we've confirmed that, the government of Guyana has not been officially informed of any investigations into the Mohammed or what the charges are, or the allegations are. At this stage, no such official notification. Secondly, I've noticed in the same story that when asked for comments, every U.S. agency denied to comment on the story. So the government of Guyana will act on this matter when the U.S. engages it officially, if it engages the government of Guyana. Right now, we have a story in Reuters with some allegations. Now, in that story, they made some allegations that the president's family is close to the Mohammeds, and somehow that the Mohammeds may have influenced his elections as president of Guyana, and that the Mohammeds may be, that he is somehow acting in favor of the Mohammeds. Now, I know President Ali for a long time. I knew him when he was a technical person at the Ministry of Finance. So I sent him as a regional planner when it was in early days, into Region 3. And then he subsequently headed the CDB portfolio, and he was part of the depressed committee that Mr. Hoyt and I set up with Philomena Sahoy. He became a minister. He's always been he's been the finance secretary of the party for a number of years, one of the most senior persons and most aggressive party members in a positive way in terms of hard work. President Ali earned his position as our candidate. It didn't come from anyone influencing us. He comes from a long history of a family that has been in the struggle. His grandmother with Chedi Jagan in the early days. So he earned his position as the presidential candidate of this party. I was the leader of the opposition and general secretary of the party. The Mohammeds had no role to play in his elections. He worked hard. We campaigned as a party throughout this country, and the people of Guyana chose him. So I don't understand that aspect. It's a rumor that Reuters had there, that somehow they influenced somehow his selection and elevation into the presidency. Absolute nonsense. I've known him for a long time. Secondly, that somehow the Mohammeds are benefiting from, or benefited from the engagement with Exxon through this consortium because of links with the government of Guyana. We had absolutely nothing to do with their bidding process. Absolutely nothing to do with their bidding process. ExxonMobil went through a tender. There were several Guyanese companies that were bidding there, and some in partnership with others. Like almost all were in partnership with others. The government of Guyana had no say, nor did it influence the contracts being given. Thirdly, I heard from some like Lincoln Lewis and the others saying, anyhow, maybe I shouldn't get into that now, because that's all rumors. So let me make it clear. Government of Guyana had absolutely no influence on Exxon toward any contract. In fact, we will not do it because then we don't want to be beholden like Trotman and the APNU were because of favors to any oil company. And that's our policy. Then the story goes on to speculate again that Exxon may be getting its permits from the government of Guyana because of the Mohammeds' perceived close contact with the president. Now, what are the permits that they got? The environmental permits and the permits to the development permits. Like Payara, Yellowtail, etc. Those are the two sets of permits they got. Now, the most egregious thing about the relationship with Exxon was done when Irfan Ali was not president. It was the contract. The contract. The permitting here is almost a routine issue once they comply with certain technical specifications, and we made it clear we want to develop the industry. We have not been shy about that. We want to develop it as quickly as possible. That's a policy position that we didn't go and whisper it in the mountains in Letem, like the mountains there, the Kanaku Mountains. We just said that openly. We hired international specialists to review every one of those applications before we issue the permits. We've strengthened them immeasurably beyond the first one that was given by APNU. We have strengthened the environmental permits. I am in charge, basically, policy-wise, of this sector. Not a single day did Irfan Ali call me, or the Mohammeds could ever call me and say, we're part of some consortium with Exxon, accelerate something or do something. I would find it reprehensible, and it never happened. The president never intervened one single day on their behalf or anyone's behalf. He's a stickler for process in these matters. And I know because I am in charge policy-wise of this area. So that's another speculation too. All of these, a ton of speculation. 5 sources, 3 sources, 8 sources here. I can't answer for Reuters on what they're doing. Maybe they have sources, maybe they verify their sources, that's their business. But where it concerns all of these things. Now, every single day, I see people, some that I don't want to see even. I meet them out there that hung you for things. Some of them have long criminal records. The same guy who was using my name to extort people, came to OP, collected money from someone to arrange a meeting with me because I'd said to him, contact my secretary, that we got locked up in this country. We got the police to pick him up at OP. A couple days ago, I saw him charged again. This is the 4th time he's been charged for extortion. And then he was busy conning another family out of New York and using our names. He's not stopped. Next time I'll bring his picture and put it at my press conference, and please let everybody carry this. He's a serial con man. I would not like to bump into him, but everywhere you go, he's there in all these circles. He shows up there places, he cons his way into things. Now, President Ali meets a lot of people. I have no doubt that he's friendly with the entire business community, the Mohammeds, people. People go to meet the president all the time. It doesn't mean they get special treatment. And this is a small country. The point I'm making, it's a small country. It's not knowing a person here or maybe sitting down at the same table as the person. It's not a rarity in Guyana. It doesn't mean that the person has special treatment. It's just that we're small and you bump into people all the time and they have very few activities that the same people go to. That's why at one stage I stopped going to this cocktail circuits. It's the same people you see over and over again. So that seeing the president one time with the Mohammeds or someone else doesn't mean that they have any relationship. As General Secretary of this party, when there was a rumor that you had 3 sets of people, Roger Khan, Tamesh Jagmohan, and the Mohammeds, all claiming to be close to the PPP and fighting, and they had some little fight in the public domain. I made it clear at a press conference that we hold no beef for any of these groups, that they have to comply with the laws of this country like anyone else. When we discovered that the Mohammeds were using the same lobbying firm that we were using, Elizabeth Harper, the permanent secretary, met with them and said to them, we are disengaging from you. We disengaged from that firm because they didn't tell us that the Mohammeds had contracted them to do lobbying work for them. So none of this. And so to bring President Ali into this, of course, give the article higher profile globally. But it's all rumor-based. And so, of course, President Ali will be our presidential candidate in 2025, and we'll win the elections again with him in 2025.
Of course, I would assume that the investors usually are not thinking ahead, must be thinking ahead. should the U.S. impose sanctions with or without acknowledging the ban for engaging, what would be the possible options? Yeah.
No, but once, if the U.S. were to impose sanctions, then the government would have to assess how it deals with those sanctions. And, of course, take steps to protect the interests of Guyana. Guyana. That's our primary concern. We elected to, and we've always worked, this party, to protect the interests of our country. Our country. The whole issue, I see a big thing about gold smuggling now too. And it's absolutely right. And I saw the GHK Lal saying something, your analyst, and I gather your part, he owns part of the Demerara waves. I don't know if it's true, but no, but that's an aside. Okay, all right. I'm not assuming. I said, no, but I'm not assuming. I just said I've seen the rumors too. Like, okay, all right. So he's not part of your program, but I saw him reflected prominently several times writing for the Demerara Waves, first as a Wall Street analyst, and now I saw the Wall Street analyst part has been dropped. But he was on the gold board too. That's the point I'm coming back. Kaichor News has a drop-in declaration of gold from 2017. At that time, he was chairman of the gold board. So maybe he should give some explanations, but it's true. It's absolutely true that we have noticed, especially the last couple of years, a significant deviation. And with the story coming out from Brazil, now we realize that it may be diverting. We at one stage thought that Venezuelan gold was coming into Guyana to bypass the sanctions and go out north through a legal route. Now we're realizing that it's actually our gold going into Brazil. And obviously, to bypass the 5% royalty and the 2% final tax, 7% that they don't have to pay. That might be one of the reasons. So there is an ongoing investigation into that, and we're going to take tough measures against people, because we're going to track also those who are benefiting from concessions. A lot of the local medium-scale miners, they get concessions from the government too. And if they're part of this racket, then they will face consequences too, as well as those who are part of the export of the gold. They would have consequences. So it's a factual thing, but when we saw an article recently in Brazil, we had not been officially notified before that all of this gold was going into Brazil. In fact, we found it strange that our gold would go there. We were thinking that Venezuelan gold was coming here, but it doesn't seem so. So I'm not speculating. No, I don't want to. The same way I don't want to speculate on this gentleman ownership of your property, I don't want to speculate here. Let me say we'll take measures to protect Guyana. That's what we need to do. And there could be several things, but I don't want to say what the remedies are here. We can deal with that at some other stage. Anything else? Yeah. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Well, I don't want to comment on something that I've not tracked. And by the way, let me deal with this GPA thing. I saw in a strange kind of way, you know, this kind of the leadership of the GPA, particularly Nazima Raghubir. She also wants to dictate. She wants to dictate the president how he conducts his press conference, and then somehow made it seem as though because the president didn't answer their questions, that the country doesn't know about our policy making or our plans for the sectors. We can sit and tell you what our plans are for every single sector, and they've been in the public domain already. They've been in the public domain from day one. So because the president doesn't answer her questions, or she doesn't get to stay for 4 hours with the president and ask him everything under the sun, then suddenly there's no transparency in the government, and they're not aware of what our policies are. We have defined our policies in every single area, something that APNO and AFC have been incapable of doing. Incapable. We've defined it in every single area, whether it's in the environment sector, oil and gas, it's food security, it's infrastructure construction, everywhere. Healthcare, we have defined our agenda in every sector. So this is important. I lost track of your question when I... Oh yes. So something that now I don't want to respond to that yet, because it could simply be that there's shortage of dollars but not the instruments, because sometimes you do have that. But so if you look at a transfer instrument, it's still at 210, 212 or something like that, 210. But they have periodic shortages of the physical currency. And so that is a blip, and that goes down back. For me, so far, it's not a structural issue of a major shortage. We can supply from the central bank if there are shortages, currency into the market, and the banks can access currency. So that is why I don't see it as a structural issue. But you should be happy that the rate has not appreciated, because an appreciation of the rate is a sign of the Dutch disease, and that kills the other sectors of the economy, which is feared by economists around the world. The appreciation in cases where you have a resource windfall, like an oil and gas sector, is much more a problem for policymakers than, in this case, keeping the exchange rate constant. So that is a good thing. Not that the economy has overheated a bit, because we did have an increase in the cost of labor. You know, a carpenter now wants to work for more and everything else, and we have shortages of drivers and stuff like that. There's some overheating there, and the price of material. But on the Dutch disease side, that is the change of relative prices through the transmission mechanism of the currency. That has not happened, and that should be a good news for the country. Because had that, assuming if it had gone down to say 200 to 1 now, you know what would have happened to the manufacturing and agricultural sector. Practically kill them off, because especially they export the tradable sectors. So I don't see it as a fundamental issue. I'd look into it. Oh, the point I was coming right to. So Nazima Ragumir, in her in something says, Jagdeo don't answer questions too. So I'm the anomaly. I hold regular meetings. The government doesn't hold press conferences. On one hand, I hold too much. I talk too much, and then Jagdeo doesn't answer the questions. He refers you to another minister. It's only on maybe 2 occasions that I've done that, and I said, deal with Vic on that issue. He would have the information. It's not the core issues. I deal with everything of substance on the oil and gas sector. Even when I said, like, the contracts you had raised about them not being published, you know, the mining contracts. I said, I'll deal with the minister, and then I personally dealt with it. It's not like we were not giving answers. It's just that sometimes they have other portfolio too. And just you have to give the minister a call if you want data. Why should I be dealing with data requests at my press conference? Go through that mechanism. And so she uses my name in the press conference. I didn't want to be in part of nothing of our press releases. It just taints me when I feel slimy when I'm part of our press releases. So she should stop using me as an example, because, and especially in that case by saying, Jagdeo refers you to other ministers. You've seen this, the country has seen my press conferences. But she had to find something, we're not getting enough information and interaction with the government. What interaction with her could you have? Because all she will do is distort everything you say and twist it in favor of APNU. It's as clear as that. Where in the world would she get to meet the chief of staff or the commissioner of police? She's palavering with big photo up with the commissioner of police and the chief of staff. She doesn't have access. In fact, we are too accessible sometimes. And the president, that's part of his problem. It's too accessible sometimes. Well, it's not a problem, it's our nature. So that's the issue. Yes, please. Yeah, man, you giving me you have a minister here. I'm referring you to the minister on these audits. How many times have I said we got to talk to Stacia and the minister? You want me to? All right. I will undertake to get you a call from the minister. So you're getting referred to a minister on exactly where they are now. With both, yes. All right, so you'll get a call. That's even serving you, the media now. Nazima Raghuweer wouldn't get that treatment if she was in the U.S. If she was there, she wouldn't get the vice president arranging for a minister to call the reporter. Right? Special treatment for Starbuck News there. Okay. Yes, please. You want some special treatment? I must call Glenlal. He's raving mad now. I can't call him. He's like in a mad mood. I'm gone totally political now. Raving mad. I think he needs some psychiatric care. Every time I say that, for the next 3 days, he cusses me non-stop. Even issues that he's not talking about me, but my picture in the background. You know, so he gets crazy, yeah. But he's been peddling a lot of nonsense too, you know, a lot of gibberish, a lot of crazy things. I send him back, you know, he sends these TikTok and the WhatsApp. So sometimes I'll post him an article and they trip him off a bit. Post him back an article from some of the other newspapers when they rebut the nonsense he talks about. Yeah. Oh, but that is, yeah, because they're, you know, after the main thing ended, then they have that. But I don't know, that should be one of those big contracts too, right? Isn't it available? Okay, well then I'll check with them why. Because if they have an agreement there. I don't think it's a production agreement as yet. May not be a production agreement, but we look at it. But they're doing a lot of exploration. Yes.
These large-scale companies, are they ready where the mines also are responsible? But the underground monitoring their operations?
Well, they should be. I can't tell you that because I don't run the GGMC. I can't tell you that at this mine, a large-scale mine, that they're there constantly. So I've noticed in the declarations, at least one foreign company, they're declaration has dropped to. And so we are paying attention to that. Well, I know recently that they had police action against a few people. Police action against a few people who were coming from Suriname, and they were staying at the Princess Hotel and doing this, but they had Guyanese who were operating on their behalf. So there was that being looked at. So we believe that some people may be doing this. We heard also that because Trinidad has exchange control, that some companies are ordering stuff for Trinidad and then paying through Guyana, their suppliers, because they have issues of not getting foreign currency there, the Trinidad business. So there is some of that too that's happening. So all of those things are being looked at. And sometimes it's hard to know if they place an order and ostensibly it's for Guyana, how much of it gets split and goes into Trinidad and how much actually comes here. But a full payment is made from Guyana. So there are lots of those issues too that would create more demand for foreign currency here and could lead to issues. But this is precisely what the audit would do. That's what the audit does. The audit looks at industry standards and then see if they deviate from industry standards. So that's how it's dealt with, through that mechanism. So for example, if the industry standard for insurance is, say, like maybe a premium of 0.5%, and they're charging for the insurance maybe 0.8%. Remember, there is a question where the related company had provided the insurance bond and all of these issues, the insurance for the EPA permit, and so they look at the premium. So that is those are some of the things that we have to look for in the audit itself. But clearly, we're in discussing the law, we have had a number of comments now, a large number of comments on the bill itself. So there are a lot of comments that came that the measures, without changing the fiscal terms in the PSA, that was asked of me, whether we're open to changing that from the draft, and I said no. But as part of the auction, the requirement now that we're introducing is that if you don't proceed, you have to define your development costs and your plan even in the auction. And if you don't pursue it, the penalty is very high. It's almost equivalent to the cost of the development plan that you have not pursued. So for example, if you put that you would spend $350 million to drill 3 wells, and then you don't do it in the period, you now have to pay $350 million in fine. So that is some people question that it may be too high. We had put a large number there. Right now, there is no fine. There is no fine. So us putting, like you had to put that very high, there are some concerns about that from the industry side, some concerns about expenses, especially on the taxation side, because the law dealt with a series of taxes too, like waivers, but our concern is blanket waivers. We don't want to give a blanket waiver. Like when Exxon thought they had blanket waiver for transport and they wanted to bring in a large number of SUVs, we denied them that. So whilst we gave the waivers for operational items, right, the tax waivers, it must not go into things that are, we don't believe are germane to their production. So those are the kinds of issues we're navigating through as we finalize the document to go to Parliament shortly. Now I saw Patterson saying they had comments, but they will share the comments in the on the floor in Parliament. Of course, they're going to go there and grandstand again, and because they could have easily shared the specific concerns, because they're afraid if they share those concerns that they would look silly and it would be rebutted. In a political environment like the chamber, you get to talk a lot of bills without being punished for it. You know, a lot of nonsense. And you get protected because you can't be sued for libel. Trotman willing to help us? No, have you considered this? I'm just speculating, Wiley. That Trotman's only purpose for bringing out that book was to say he didn't commit any fraud. I made an error, I did this, etc., but I didn't commit any fraud. And could that be the biggest vulnerability of the contract? If a fraud was committed, the contract could be set aside. Same way I want to speculate. I want to say to Glenlal how foolish he is. Because the purpose of doing this, if Exxon could tell him not to say anything at that time, maybe Exxon told him to say this now. Maybe Exxon told him to write this book. Maybe they wrote it for him. I'm just speculating. It's wild. So don't report me all over the place. But I just want to say how stupid this guy is. And imagine the man that's no credibility. Now he can be questioned, etc. Trotman has absolutely no credibility for me. He can't help us do anything. Could help Glenlal, because Glenlal is clutching at any straw he could find. Imagine he praises Trotman now. Suddenly he started praising Trotman, the man who did this contrary to advice. All of the advice, the new drafts from his people, he did it. Now he is the hero of Guyana's oil story. It's stupid. If he only stopped for a minute and think, Glenlal, then he would realize that he's been led by the nose all the time. He's been led by the nose. All right, thank you very much.